It's 10 questions on my favorite schmohawk of all time, Mr. Art Vandelay, a.k.a. George Costanza from Seinfeld, as picked by Patreon subscriber Luke McKay. This is Trivia with Buds. What it be? And welcome to another episode of the Trivia with Buds podcast. Thanks for checking out this show. If you like trivia, if you like pop culture, you are in the right place. We're going to get into some fantastic questions from the show Seinfeld in just a few minutes. Quick note of my deepest sympathies for everyone experiencing devastation in New Zealand right now. I know I have a lot of people that check out the show around the world, and I'm sure there's some listeners not far from where this horrible massacre happened this week. So I just want to say how sorry I am for anyone affected by something just so terrible, so evil, and so wrong. If you're looking for a way to donate to victims of this tragedy, there's a CNN link in the show notes of this episode to several outlets and verified crowdfunding pages that you can check out. So definitely go to the show notes, click the CNN link, and pick your link for crowdfunding and donating and try and help out some people in need right now in New Zealand. The goal of this show is always to take your mind off the crazy things going on in the world and in your life today. So we're going to jump into 10 great questions on one of my favorite TV characters of all time, George Costanza from Seinfeld. He's based on the neurotic Larry David. So if you dig Curb Your Enthusiasm, this is sort of like the prequel to what you see Larry doing on Curb. This topic was picked by Luke McKay, who always has great questions and topics for the show. So sit back and see how many of these 10 questions you can get on Art Vandelay himself. We're going to jump into those questions right now. Here we go. All right, here we go with 10 questions on George from Seinfeld. Sometimes I look up different sources and things to see if I can write the questions or come up with some good content. But today, pretty confident in saying that these questions all came from my own dome because I love this show so much. And I love these hyper-specific categories, like where it's a specific character from a show, especially if it's a show that I dig as much as this one. So here we go. We're going to jump into 10 questions on George from Seinfeld. Question number 1, George gets talked into buying a 1989 LeBaron convertible when the salesman tells him it was once owned by what actor? Question number 1, George gets talked into buying a 1989 LeBaron convertible when the salesman tells him it was once owned by what actor? Question number 1. Question number 2, what is George's middle name on the show? George Costanza has a middle name. What is George's middle name? Also, if you hear any background noises, there's a crazy wind the last 3 days in California, so you could hear it through the window. It sounds like some sort of ghoul, so just keep in mind. Ooh, there's a good one. Hopefully that got picked up. Question number 3, what type of pastry does George remove and eat from the rim of a trash can in the episode called The Gymnast? Number 3, what type of pastry does George eat out of the garbage on The Gymnast? Question number 4, George dates a woman named Julie who takes credit for buying what lunch item for Elaine? Number 4, George dates a woman named Julie who takes all the credit for buying what lunch item for his friend Elaine? Question number 5, what does George suggest the Yankees do to produce cooler players on the baseball field? Number 5, what does George suggest the Yankees do to produce cooler players on the field? Question number 6, in The Pitch, how much money does George initially turn down from NBC to write the pilot with Jerry? Number 6, in The Pitch, how much money does George initially turn down from NBC to write the pilot with Jerry? Question number 7, what board game does George play against the Bubble Boy with Susan? Number 7, what board game does George play against the Bubble Boy with Susan? Question number 8, after the Yankees and the Summer of George, where does George start working again as a fake handicapped person? Number 8, after the Yankees and the Summer of George, where does George start working again as a fake handicapped person? Question number 9, what nickname did George want to go by when his coworkers called him Coco instead? Number 9, what nickname did George want to go by when his coworkers called him Coco instead? And number 10, what arcade game does George purchase from Mario's Pizzeria to try to lock in his high score? Number 10, what arcade game does George purchase from Mario's Pizzeria to try and lock in his high score? All right, those are your 10 questions on George Costanza from Seinfeld. We'll be right back with the answers to see how you did in just a second. All right, we got the answers to the George Costanza questions. I always put a bed of music over the question reading, so you probably heard some music, but maybe in the background of that music, you heard my dog with extremely long dog nails clicking around on our wood floor. So I apologize. He is 16 years old. His name's Romeo, and he doesn't know what's going on really. So he's just kind of clicking around, chomping on food. You might hear that on the background of this episode, and I can't really put him away because he's just wandering around. So just keep that in mind. Here are the answers to the George Costanza questions. Question number 1, George gets talked into buying a 1989 LeBaron convertible from the salesman when the salesman tells him it was once owned by who? That was John Voight. John Voight, who I think bites Kramer later in that episode. John Voight. Number 2, what is George's middle name? George Louis Costanza Lewis. George Louis Costanza. Number 3, what type of pastry does George remove and eat from the rim of a trash can in the episode called The Gymnast? It's an eclair. I think his girlfriend's mom sees him. An eclair. Number 4, George dates a woman named Julie who takes credit for buying what lunch item for Elaine? That's the big salad. The big salad. Number 5, what does George suggest the Yankees do to produce cooler players on the field? Cotton uniforms. And they shrink up on the players' cotton uniforms. Number 6, in the pitch, how much money does George initially turn down from NBC to write the pilot with Jerry? It was $13,000 or $6,500 for each of them. And they end up doing it for $8,000 and they get $4,000 each, which is a crazy low amount of money. Number 7, what board game does George play against the Bubble Boy with Susan? Trivial Pursuit is the game in question. Trivial Pursuit. Number 8, after the Yankees in the summer of George, where does George start working again as a fake handicap person? It's called Play Now. I think they make playground equipment or sporting equipment. Play Now. Number 9, what nickname did George want to go by when his coworkers called him Coco instead? He wanted to go by T-Bone. T-Bone, which I call my son Tommy probably every day. I'm like, what's up, T-Bone? And number 10, what arcade game does George purchase from Mario's Pizzeria to try to lock in his high score? It is the Frogger game from high school. So he had the high score, and he gets it on like a power brick, and he's trying to move it out so he can keep his high score locked in, and it gets hit by a truck. It's great. That's one of the best episodes of all time, The Frogger. Check that one out. How many did you get? Maybe George's future baby name, 7. That would be good. That'd be like 70%, 7 out of 10. If I was playing these questions, I think I would have got 7 or 8. If you got all 10, you truly are a master of your domain, just like on the show. If you want more Seinfeld trivia, we've done it twice on the show with episode 69, Seinfeld Trivia, which I think was 100 questions or 50 questions from this card that I had made up for a thing called Bud's Box, which was kind of before I did Patreon. I had this like a subscription box where I'd send you stuff every quarter. And one of the things was like a Seinfeld trivia card. Thanks for the great topic choice, Luke. I always love the hyper-specific ones like this. If you dig the show, give it an iTunes review. It'll take you 2 minutes. And let me know when you post one so I can send you something cool in the mail. Just leave the review and email ryanbuds@gmail.com to let me know. And we will make sure you get some cool stuff in the mail. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Thanks for telling a friend about this trivia show. And we'll see you tomorrow for more trivia with me. Cheers.